Okie doke. Welcome, everybody. And thank you all for joining in tonight. And I need to turn on my light here. There we go. Much better. Um, Tonight's discussion is going to be a little different than one we've had originally. And like I said, thank you all for kind of chiming in this evening or whenever you're watching it, if you're watching the recording. I always like to start with this. If you have a body, you are an athlete. So many of us I hear can't even say I'm an athlete, and you just finished a marathon. Trust me, you finished a marathon. You have a body, you are an athlete. Simple stated. Um, that's me, my book. Okay. Here's what we're talking about tonight. I want everybody to start thinking in terms of periodization and goals for races. How do you go from one to the next, as opposed to, oh, let's just do it? You know, we'll discuss all of that in a moment. Plan your races out a little more strategically than, oh, this one and that one. And oh, I heard so and so is going to that race. Let's do that one. Um, and also consider future goals. Plan out goals for your future of racing, whatever that may be. And not just racing, but what you want to do with it all, where you want to be, maybe 2 years from now. And that's what we're going to discuss. Okay. Periodization. We've never really had these terms that I recall. Um, I may have mentioned them on the offing, but I want you to just hear these terms. Micro, a micro schedule would be like 1 week, 1 week of daily routines, right? Daily workouts. That would be a micro schedule, 1 week. Macro schedule would essentially be like one period, would be like 1 month or so thereabouts, one period of that periodization schedule that makes up the whole season, one portion of that season. Meso schedule would be the entire season. Every week, day, whatever, all of it, all plotted out in general. A meso schedule could include, if you're not including the micro elements of it, a meso schedule could really just include the distances for each week, the totals for each week, an approximation of what percentage you want to do with low heart rate or high heart rate work. That might be an example of a meso schedule. And I could show you several examples of that. I don't know that you really need to see it because you'll probably never ever really work with that type of a broad schedule unless you're a coach. Um, and even then, I don't really do that very often, except for maybe a long shot or a coaching certification. I just had to create one for a meso schedule with really just the totals for weeks and percentages and that kind of thing. At any rate, um, an ultra meso schedule would be like, what are a next few years going to be like? What is it you want to accomplish in the next few years would be an ultra meso schedule. So with those terms in mind, let's move forward. Goal setting, we've discussed. I did have a whole lecture on just goal setting, so I'm going to zip right through this. Be grateful. In order to create a positive goal, start with being grateful, or what we call gratitude. You know, be thankful for whatever it is that you have in life. Imagine is the next step. Just the go big. Whatever you can come up with, just the broadest of horizons. Just go big. Imagine whatever it is you can to create a goal. And then sit down, create a goal, and write it down. If you don't write it down, statistics show that most people, I think the number is like 80%, will never accomplish that goal if they don't write it down. So write down your goal, tell friends, talk to people about it, and then create a plan. Create a plan around this goal that you want to do. Maybe you want to do a marathon, maybe you want to get faster, whatever it may be, and we'll discuss some of those in a moment. Um, Create that plan from A to B, A to Z, whatever it is. And then implement that plan. Go for it with all you got and make sure that you're consistent in this. If you take a couple weeks off because, it's been rainy or, whatever, try and be as consistent with this goal implementation as you possibly can, because that's where you have the greatest chance for success. Okay, now we've gone through all the basics that I want to dive into briefly. Now let's go into the deeper talk. Um, when you're planning your races, try and plan races strategically. You'll have a better time, um, not just, oh, that looks cute. Let's do that race. They have a good goodie bag. I like their t-shirt. I mean, those are good reasons, I suppose, but you would probably be better off if you plan your races out and your entire season out strategically. And what I mean by that is, like take a look at the McCourt Foundation and what they do in the course of a year. They start with the Santa Monica Classic, a 5K, 10K. Then they build to a half marathon, the Rose Bowl half, which of course got postponed this year. But normally the Rose Bowl half is, before the marathon. And then they do the marathon. So plan out from shorter distances to a little longer. I mean, yes, you could do a half marathon, then go back to a 5K, 10K to do speed workout as a part of that race. It can be a speed training run after a half marathon, a couple of weeks after the half. So you're fully recovered, you're started to build again, and you gave yourself a week of taper. Of course, every time you do a race, you benefit from 2 weeks of taper before the race. So theoretically, every 4 weeks or so, you have a week of taper, but not two. So you may be losing a week of taper to do 2 weeks to be at your best for that upcoming race. So if you're doing 20 races and you're doing 2 week tapers before each one because you want to do well at each race, that's like 20 weeks of like just tapering. You're going to need a year to plot something like that out to make it work. And hopefully you're starting low heart rate, excuse me, smaller distances and building to bigger distances. I'm not going to really recommend that kind of strategy. You do benefit from taking like a week off completely here and there to relax. This is something we'll talk about after the Rose Bowl half. But to relax our next race, relax your central nervous system at the end of the season. Normally, our marathon is the end of the season. Obviously, the fires kind of screwed things up here in LA. Um, but at any rate, so try and build a season, 5K, 10K, half, full. Do you want to do an Ironman? Build on top of all that, build that at the end of all that. Um, and maybe sprinkle in, like I said, a few 5K, 10Ks for speed work. And they don't necessarily need to be an A race. You can create A races like the LA Marathon. You can create B races like the Orange County 10K or 5K or something like that, or even Long Beach half, something like that, which would be kind of a race, but it would be more of a training run because you'd only have a 1 week taper before it at the end of your building block of 4 weeks, possibly 3 week build, and then the fourth week taper. That is certainly one thing to consider. A races and B races. B races you don't really taper that much for, like I said, and you don't really your ability will not be on full for them. But all good. But plan out your entire season. Plan it out, like I said, strategically. So you'll have your best results and your most enjoyable results without the risk of injury. Oftentimes I hear people, they do race after race after race after race, and boom, they're injured. And it's just too much. It's just too much. Too hard, too fast, too many. We don't do that many or long speed workouts. So if you're doing like a half marathon as a threshold run, you know what I'm saying? And you're doing back-to-back half marathons, one every 2 weeks, it becomes way too much volume and intensity, too much pounding, too long a period of time. So good, plan it out strategically. And if in terms of goal setting for like an ultra meso schedule, think not just this year. Don't just think your meso schedule, your season of training, or even a year of training. Think about where you want to be like 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, what we call an ultra meso schedule. What are your goals that you would want to achieve? They say that it takes like, 2 to 3 years for someone to BQ, meaning Boston qualify. I don't mean barbecue. I mean qualify for Boston, Boston qualifier. Um, it can take, a couple of years before you can do all of the five world classics, which are now six, I believe. Tokyo, London, Berlin, Boston, Chicago, New York I think I missed one. That was six. Yeah. So it could take a couple of years before you get the money and the ability to do all six of those world class, huge, huge races. I mean, almost all of them, except for maybe Boston. I think Boston is almost 40,000, 42,000 or so, last I heard. I'm not sure. But the others are more like 50,000. The LA Marathon is over 22,000, 23,000. But think double that is what those world classics are in size. They're massive. I mean, all of them are really, if you want a big race, those are some real exciting races. But also, destination races are great to consider for your future down the road. What destination races would you want to do? I here wrote down Rome, Athens. I particularly loved Rome as a city. Athens, eh, I I loved the Rome race. Athens was the toughest race. I could understand why that character, Phidippides, 2,500 years ago, or whenever it was, who carried the parchment from Maratona, Greece, or Marathon, Greece, all the way to Athens, handed it to the king. It said Nike, or Nike, as we pronounce it in English, hence the name of the running club. Nike, meaning victory, and then passed out and died, basically, as the story goes. There are some conflicting ideas about that story, whether it was really Phidippides, that this real life distance runner, or someone else, keeping in mind he fought this battle at Maratona, Greece all night long, and then ran probably the toughest marathon I've ever run in my life. And he's probably running it with metal helmet and chest plate and sword in hand in case he ended up with some, the enemy in his midst. I don't know, but no one, I guess, really knows at this point. But that's a tough marathon, like 13 miles of just rolling up hills. So that's one you really need to be on your best ability for. And that would be something that you may not want to do like your first year of training or marathoning. You do want to get a couple marathons under your belt before you may want to try that one out. Um, Rome was not as tough, but think about future goals. What do you want to do for all these different races, as opposed to just, going a couple of years and doing this one and that one and this one, and never really thinking it through. Think through what races you want to do, what accomplishments you want to have. We talked about goals. What goals do you want to achieve from either running or whatever? Like I said, do you want to qualify for Boston? You want to have a PR, a PB, personal best, personal record, PR, PB. Do you want to run the 50 states, one marathon in each of the 50 states? They have t-shirts that say 50 states marathoner. Do you want to become a member of the Marathon Maniacs? Kid you not, check it out, marathonmaniacs.com. At little races in the middle, the United States is not made up of major cities. Most of the country is not Chicago, New York, San Francisco, LA. Most of the country is not like us here in Los Angeles. Most of the country is smaller little towns that have really great little races. And, you know, um, there is this group called Marathon Maniacs. And if you ever go to a smaller town race, like Grandma's Marathon in Duluth, Wisconsin, a great marathon. I love that marathon, but it's much, much smaller than LA. Before the race, you will see about 100 or so Marathon Maniacs all wearing their Marathon Maniac t-shirts. And what it is they've all done the minimum of 3 marathons in 3 months. I think the pinnacle level, they have all these different levels. The peak level is 1 marathon a week for a year. There are very few people who have achieved that. My wife being one of them. She is a member of the Marathon Maniacs, though she does not always wear her Marathon Maniac shirt, but she does show up in the morning. She has for the Marathon Maniac picture because they all congregate. They take a big picture because it's a cool thing. Um, at any rate, do you want to someday do an Ironman? Get a couple marathons under your belt, get a couple sprint or Olympic distance triathlons under your belt, so you know about transition, so you know about equipment, so you know a lot of the tricks of triathlon, and then an Ironman. It just ends with a little marathon. That's all. And 112-mile bike ride before that, and a 2.4-mile swim before all of that. Piece of cake. We can all do that tomorrow, right? Well, maybe not. Anyway, plan your future out so you can build to something like this. And those are all important considerations for the future. And with that, also one last thing. I forgot. I just added this one. Know your why, right? I am constantly reminded of a certain running shoe company that may still, used to have a logo that said, just do it. And I've always hated that. It's this kind of macho idea that just do it. Get out there and just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. No, have a reason, have a why. People with a goal and a reason and a why are the most motivated people in the world to do anything. If it's pouring down rain and cold, you don't just go out there and do it, or after a while you'll burn out and you'll never want to do it ever again. But if you have a why, if you want to have a PR, if you want to build for some race that you want to qualify for Boston at, you have a why. When it's pouring down rain and cold, although I do confess some of my best runs have been in the rain, the key is stay warm. Dry, hell, we take showers, we swim. It has nothing to do with staying dry. Stay warm and you're okay. But you'll go out there in anything, you know? You'll wear a helmet if it's sleeting out and you'll go run out in the sleet. I don't know. But just do it doesn't cut it. Have a why and know what your why is. That's the great motivator. It also gives you focus. What is your why for a specific workout? And this is something we've never really discussed completely. We've discussed aerobic, anaerobic, we all know all that. But we never mentioned have the why for each individual workout, right? Is your workout focus going to be a slow, low heart rate aerobic run we call easy run to build endurance, right? To build capillary veins and arteries, mitochondria, oxidative enzymes. Those three things that we call that give us endurance. They enable us to tap in more efficiently to that fat resource, which is a much, much more abundant resource, right? So that would be an aerobic, an endurance workout, an easy paced workout. That's your why for that workout is to stay low heart rate. So you could really focus, okay, I'm low heart rate. This is my why. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. If you want, now you can always have combinations of this, but if you want your run to be focusing on speed, like a track workout, there you now need to run fast. If you want your workout to be on high heart rate, where you're going to raise the bar to a higher heart rate where you can still tap into fat, that big abundant reservoir, and also you can use at higher heart rate, you can use carbohydrate more efficiently, then you want high heart rate work. It's not about speed, it's about ongoing. Okay, even though I'm slowing down, I'm breathing just as hard as I was earlier. And that's my goal, that's my motivation. It's about anaerobic, it's raising that threshold with high heart rate work. Not speed, but high heart rate work, threshold runs, T pace. So have your reason, right? Hill training, you're building strength. You're going up that hill. You're short, quick strides on the uphill and then even more so on the downhill. But focus on not just learning how to do proper form with hills, but also building strength, right? That's the focus. You can even take a bike and ride up a hill to build quad strength. If that's what you want to do. Of course, you could go to a gym and do something similar, but have a focus. Know your why, which will motivate you. You know, what is your goal, overall goal? But know your why also for each individual workout. What is the purpose of that workout? And as always, number one rule, our number one rule that precipitates everything that we do, rule number one, you need to have fun. And rule number two is if you're not having fun, if you're not living up to rule number one, you need to fix something, right? In other words, maybe you're pushing yourself too far, too hard. Maybe you're running yourself into the ground because you're overtraining now. If you're not having fun, if it's not enjoyable, maybe you're not ready for speed work yet. You know, you need to do more endurance building before you can do the high heart rate stuff for any length of time. You're just killing yourself for no reason. You need more endurance work. If you're having fun, generally speaking, a lot of these other things just fall into place naturally. So make sure that you live up to rule number one and that you're having fun. And with that, I say train smart and train to win, because if you don't, you won't. And if you do, you just might. I thank you all this evening. And with that, I thank you all for chiming in. And I will see you all at the finish line in 2 weeks and 3 days from now at the Rose Bowl half, which obviously got shoved back this year due to the tragic fires that we had in the Eaton fires, specifically near Pasadena. Which just destroyed the air quality. Really sad. At any rate, thank you all. And with that, I am going to turn off the recording and I am going to, there we are. And I'm going to talk to all of you who are on live. And with those of you who are not on live, you're watching the recording, thanks for chiming in. And we'll see you next week, Thursday Night Chat. Good night.